same-sex marriage a possible answer to that question? What do we do? First of all, consider some trends in marriage. There have been 3 developments in marriage law and practice that have gradually eroded the basis for excluding same-sex couples from the institution. I would label these the decline of gender, the delinking of marriage, sex, and procreation, and third, the rise of romance. So see, you have something to look forward to in the next few minutes, the rise of romance. The decline of gender. There was a time when women in marriage were treated as chattel, as the property of their husbands. They did not have a separate legal existence, no right to contract, no right to claim rape against their husbands. Marriage was the formalized state-sanctioned subordination of women to men. It gave men dominion over women. Over the past 100 years or so, that has changed to a very significant degree. There is now a formal equality under the law between married men and women. And these changes, every single one of them, were resisted every step of the way. We've got warnings about the decline of families and the decay of human civilization if these changes were made. But they have been made. So if sex is no longer a relevant, substantive legal category within marriage, no longer defines the relations and rights of one spouse to another within marriage, then the question can arise really for the first time, why does sex remain a definitional category, limiting who can enter a marriage? Now, one answer to that question might have been that sex was, of course, still relevant to procreation. And one reason for marriage is to encourage responsible procreation, that is, having babies within the marital bond. And same-sex couples cannot procreate as a couple. But that runs up against the second development in marriage law, and that is what I would call the delinking of marriage, sex, and procreation. Procreation has never been a requirement of marriage. Lots of people marry who cannot procreate or do not want to procreate, either because of stability or because of age, or it's their own preference. By my calculation, about 6% of marriages involving women of childbearing age can't themselves procreate, or have husbands who can't procreate. Already 6% of the marriages. Now, it has to be said, of course, that most people of childbearing age can procreate if they want to. But modern law and contraceptives technology have led to the decline of procreation as an inescapable fact of the marital bond. We've had the rejection over the course of the 20th century of state laws that forbade contraception, culminating in the Supreme Court's decision in 1965 in Griswold versus Connecticut, declaring a right of married couples to choose not to procreate by using contraceptives. Second, we've had the rise of the pill and its widespread use starting almost 50 years ago. And then third, we've had quite liberalized abortion laws under Roe versus Wade and continuing under Casey. So that today, procreation is really an option, not a necessity within marriage. It is not an inescapable fact of marriage. And in light, that's not to say, by the way, that procreation is unimportant. Procreation is important. I strongly oppose the extinction of human civilization. But it cannot, I just want to go on record about that, but it cannot be the only reason that we permit marriage. And in light of heterosexuals' rejection of procreation as a fact of marriage, what basis is there to tell same-sex couples that they can't marry? With respect to the social interest in procreation, the public interest in procreation, same-sex couples are identical to opposite-sex couples who can't, or for whatever reason, won't procreate. The exclusion then rests on an idea of marriage that is at best anachronistic, no longer part of the experience, the practice, one is tempted to say the tradition of marriage as it has evolved. And the third marriage trend is what I called earlier the rise of romance. For much of human history in many societies, marriage was a way to cement political alliances between kin groups. Or it was a way to gain wealth and property, or it was a way to clear rights of inheritance or succession. It was not necessary that the spouses know each other, much less that they love each other. That has changed gradually, especially in the West over the past 100 years or so that today, for most people, marriage is, among many other things, about cementing a love bond. It's about finding and keeping that one other special person in life with whom we can suffer and die. For couples in the modern West, saying that marriage is about property or cementing political alliances is like saying the government is for serving the king or the feudal lord. And recall that same-sex couples have the same capacity for love and companionship. They share the same kinds of impulses as heterosexuals do. So if marriage is an important way of recognizing and encouraging a bond of love, it's hard to say what the basis is to exclude same-sex marriages from that recognition. Now, despite all of that, despite all of those trends in marriage, which have really fundamentally changed marriage, despite all of that, it would still be possible to exclude same-sex couples from marriage if homosexuality itself were a subject of social concern. But that runs up against the second major development, the second major converging trend over time related to homosexuality. Consider the legal and cultural changes in the treatment of gays and lesbians that we have witnessed over the past, especially half-century. We have witnessed a process of decriminalization, whereby one state after another got rid of its sodomy laws, either through legislative or judicial action, culminating in the Supreme Court's decision in Lawrence versus Texas. We've witnessed a process of demedicalization, so that homosexuals are no longer seen as sick or mentally ill, and homosexuality itself was removed from the list of mental disorders 37 years ago. Gay newspapers, communities, and organizations have flourished. Civil rights laws have been enacted so that now more than half the population of the United States lives in a jurisdiction in which people are protected from sexual orientation discrimination in one fashion or another. Openly gay politicians have been elected for the first time. All of that change was necessary for the emergence of gay families, which did indeed begin to spring up. Gay couples lived together openly, and not just in cities, but in suburbs and in rural areas. Adoption has been available to gay people in all 50 states, including recently even in Florida. Homosexuality ceased to be an automatic disqualification from child custody. Second-parent adoptions have provided some legal protection to same-sex families and is now available in at least some jurisdictions in about half the states. Gay people, not surprisingly, began raising children in increasing numbers as part of this trend, and no state has been stopping them. In short, a quasi-marriage culture has already sprouted across the country. This bottom-up movement, or momentum, led to formal recognition, starting primarily in the private sector, where companies began offering benefits to domestic partners, then spread to cities and counties, and then next to states, which began at first tentatively recognizing same-sex couples, and then in a more comprehensive way through things like civil unions or broad domestic partnership statutes. 5 states, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Vermont, New Hampshire, and at least for the time being Iowa, have actual same-sex marriage. The upshot is we will never again live in a country where it can be said that gay marriage is unavailable anywhere. It is now a fact of life in this country. Now, some of this recognition has been pushed judicially. but it is increasingly being brought to legislatures, and they are being persuaded. There has been a counter-movement, but in almost one-fourth of Americans now live in a jurisdiction in which some degree of legal recognition is available to same-sex couples. So what are the consequences of this convergence of these two major developments, in marriage law on the one hand and in our views of homosexuality on the other? What are the consequences? I think they have implications for the Burkean view of same-sex marriage. To maintain our opposition to same-sex marriage, we must either revive some abandoned view of marriage, that it is about cementing political alliances or procreation or subordinating women, or we have to defend some hoary and unsubstantiated view of homosexuality as inherently dangerous. Now you can do that. You can have a view of marriage drawing on natural law or on religious doctrine that holds that marriage has some essential, unchangeable attributes, like the view that it's about procreation and so on. Or you can defend a theory of homosexuality arising again from natural law or from some religious doctrine that is divorced from our experience or learning about the subject. That's fine. You can have those views. But what you can't do is call your opposition conservative in the Burkean sense. It's more accurate, I think, to say that your opposition is now anti-Burkean, ignoring experience and evolution, and instead drawing on abstract, a priori theorizing, which is the opposite of what Burke thought we should be doing. So in a sense, the roles have now been reversed. Same-sex marriage advocates rest increasingly on the conditions created by a Burkean process of incrementalism and evolution. Opponents increasingly rest on theories. All right, with that in mind, let's go back to the traditionalist case. First, gay marriage is a change. We have to grant that, but it is not obvious that all change should be resisted no matter what. Burke certainly did not hold that view. What Burke's view means is that gay marriage advocates have, should we say, the burden of persuasion, but it is not and cannot be an impossible burden to meet. Second, recall the Burkean concern about how practices may embody centuries of wisdom that we can no longer grasp, and that the man-woman definition of marriage may be such a case. That does urge a special caution, but it does not defeat the argument. The same could be said anytime a traditional practice had changed, from ending slavery to granting women the right to vote. We could have asked in the late 19th century, what will happen if we allow women to vote? We never let them vote before. Maybe we don't have very good reasons any longer, but we've always done it this way, and my God, the world might come to an end. Burke's insight is not a command to resist all change. It is a warning to base change to the extent possible on actual lived experience, and not simply on our own private powers of reason. The debate over gay marriage for the last 2 decades has largely been a duel of abstractions, of hopes and fears, of unsupported claims, and of hypotheticals. That has been true, by the way, on both sides of the debate. But with several countries with legal and cultural heritages similar to our own now recognizing gay marriages, and with about 1/4 of the United States now living in a jurisdiction with some recognition, the period of abstract debate is thankfully coming to an end for Burkean. The debate will start to be, and is starting to be, an empirical one. And American-style federalism, by which states are allowed to experiment with different degrees of recognition of gay families, if any, and whereby the rest of us can learn from these experiments, is almost ideally suited to learning from this accumulated experience. So far, by the way, so good. The sap is still running in the trees of Vermont, Massachusetts